G'day guys and gal. If Horus was the figurehead and icon of the traitor legions during the heresy, then Sanguinius was the same for the loyalists. Sure, Perturabo was the architect of many of Horus's plans, like how Rogel Dawn was technically the leader of the loyalist war effort, but the loyalists saw Sanguinius as their savior, with Guilliman choosing Sanguinius to be the emperor of Imperium Secundus. The great angel was utterly pure, noble, and relentless. No one could claim to be as loyal as he. But what if Sanguinius fell? What if he joined Chaos? What would the outcome of the heresy had been in that case? Which Chaos god, if any, would he have joined, and was the prospect of his fall even remotely possible? Before we get started, I'm so bloody excited to finally unveil the Fallen Angel of Blood, the most terrifying, awesome, and devastating major mini release to date. As this is an epic release, the model comes in 4 different scales, featuring the tabletop scale for all your wargaming and miniature painting needs, the 75mm art scale for a mini scale with larger details, thus overall more accessible to paint at a higher level. This is the scale I would paint at if I was going to enter into a competition, for example. The 1/6 statue scale to really show off every little detail of the mini, and then for the real goers of you out there, we have the 1/6 Titanic scale. An absolute Goliath, with only 10 of these being created, so it's a genuine collectible. This mini also features 3 head variants, the first being a demonic helmet visage, the vision of a warlord hell-bent on battle. The next head variant is a raging hungry vampire lord, his jaws so distended that his cheeks tear open, easily the scariest of the head variants. Then there is my favourite, which is an angelic face mask covering up a truly horrifying demon face beneath. Each head variant gives off an entirely different vibe. To be honest, I probably would just magnetize it so you can use all of them. The detail in this model is out of this world, but we made sure none of it was lost or blurred at the tabletop scale due to our super high res printers and custom resin. Even the fucking vampire teeth are still present at the tabletop scale. This model will only be available for 1 week before we need to take it down. No, this isn't me trying to do FOMO marketing, it's more so the logistics of producing these kinds of models and their launches. It's such a hectic model that it takes a lot more time and energy to produce, so we need to be able to stop the sales, make sure everyone gets their model in a good time frame, and then continue with our launch schedule. And then yeah, maybe we can bring it back in the future. Link below to pick them up. Dice Diorama members get a discount. 1 week only. Today we'll go over something truly heretical. What if Sanguinius fell to Chaos? Let's get into it. So with all of these more in-depth what-if videos, I never want to just make a fanfic. I want to actually tell you the most likely outcome of the situation based on my extensive knowledge of the lore, reading every Horus Heresy book, that took a while, as well as actually using in-lore examples and even conversations that took place that discussed the possibility. Something you need to understand is that fate in Warhammer 40k is fluid. Just because someone sees a vision of the future doesn't mean that future will come to pass, especially when Primarchs are involved. Primarchs bend destiny and reality around them. No one foresaw Guilliman or the Lion's return. It actually fucked with a lot of future seers as their visions were wildly off. They foresaw the fall of the Imperium, but instead they got the flaming sword of the avenging sun shoved up their assholes. So no one's fate or destiny as a loyalist or traitor was ever really set. The lore does kind of insinuate that half of the Primarchs were supposed to fall to Chaos, so saving one from falling would simply force another to fall, with some theories even stating that the Emperor deliberately treated some Primarchs, like Angron, terribly to make sure they would be the ones to fall. However, none of that is actually confirmed, and half of the Primarchs falling was probably just more clean from a narrative point of view. So let's say every Primarch could have fallen or stayed loyal. There was no preordained number. After all, Chaos, other than Tzeentch, was surprised that it ended up with Magnus on their side, who was considered hyper loyal before Prospero's fall. The idea of the fall of Prospero wasn't even to corrupt Magnus, it was to wipe out both the Space Wolves and the Thousand Sun Legions. This is also why Chaos tried to corrupt various loyalist Primarchs despite them already having half. It genuinely believed it could have more. That did seem like a bit of a random tangent, but it was more so to basically say yes, Sanguinius was allowed to fall to Chaos. He wasn't kept loyal by a cosmic force because Chaos already had their fair share. Chaos attempted to corrupt Sanguinius twice, with one of the attempts actually almost succeeding. The first was the ambush at Signus Prime, where the forces of Khorne and Slaanesh teamed up to try force Sanguinius to embrace Chaos and to save the soul of his legion. The second time was the battle against Mardale, where Mardale, who was like Chaos Jesus, wanted Sanguinius to embrace Chaos to change his fate against Horus and defeat him instead, as all Sanguinius' visions showed him dying to his brother. That second attempt failed miserably, as Sanguinius already had resolved himself to challenge fate on his own terms, plus he wasn't that scared of death. He was much more scared of his sons having a dark fate due to their gene flaws. However, the first attempt to corrupt him, he actually got very close to falling. So let's look at that and consider that the beginning of our what if. During the battle at Signus Prime, Sanguinius encountered demons for the first time, and even got his ass clapped pretty bad by Kabunda, breaking multiple bones and then getting knocked out for from the psychic backlash of Kabunda killing a ton of Blood Angels in a single mega attack. However, as the goal was to corrupt, not kill, Kabunda did not finish Sanguinius off. However, this attack, combined with a Chaos Ritual, triggered a Red Thirst blood frenzy in the entire Blood Angel Legion by a handful of warriors. They slaughtered the Chaos Army, turned on their Space Wolf allies, and were even thinking about killing each other. Sanguinius recovered, defeated Kabunda, and faced off against Kairos, the leader of the Slaneshi forces present. Kairos told Sanguinius that if he jumped into a pot of Chaos energy, he could absorb the Red Thirst entirely into himself, freeing his legion the curse, but he would surely fall to chaos. Sanguinius, desperate to save his sons, who he saw as doomed if he didn't do it, accepted the offer. However, Meros, a brave Blood Angel apothecary, jumped into the pot instead. This broke the Red Thirst frenzy, but he was not a powerful enough vessel to take away the curse properly, hence he burned and was possessed by a demon called the Red Angel. Sanguinius banished Kairos and vowed to tear the Red Angel from Meros' body and save his son. However, let's say it went a bit different. Let's say that the brave Meros fell during the battle and was not there to take his father's place. Let's say the desperate Sanguinius, who did not yet understand Chaos and how this deal would backfire horrendously for his legion, walked into the Chaos pot. To make things straightforward, let's also say that Kairos wasn't full of shit and that Sanguinius would absorb the curse of the Red Thirst entirely into himself, removing the gene flaw from his legion. What would happen? Well, yes, Sanguinius would fall, his purity and nobility being turned against him and used to break who he was apart and remake him into this abomination. Now, Meros got possessed by the Red Angel, but I doubt this would also happen to Sanguinius. A Primarch possessed by a demon was considered an inferior product. I also do not think Sanguinius would become a demon Primarch of Khorne. There is no way Slaanesh would agree to help Khorne to get another demon Primarch. It would tip the balance of power way too much. I believe the Red Thirst would overwhelm Sanguinius, less so making him fall to chaos and more so just turning him into a monster. I don't think he would become a demon, as many within the Chaos Legions wanted Sanguinius to be the new Warmaster of Chaos, not Horus. Hence he would need to not be a demon and also not be loyal to only one god. This is likely the reason Horus wanted Sanguinius to die on Signus, not become corrupted, because he knew if Sanguinius joined Chaos, he would be powerful enough to contest Horus's claim as Warmaster. Now, it's hard to say what Sanguinius's motivations would be for being Warmaster or joining Chaos, as he really didn't have an issue with the Emperor or a huge ego to exploit like Horus did. I would just say that the thirst was so intense and fucked up for him that he goes insane and wishes for nothing but to consume blood. Perhaps Chaos tells him that only by drinking the blood of the Emperor can the Red Thirst be sated, and he regain his sanity and a freedom from agony and hunger. The fate of his legion would be an interesting one. Free of the Red Thirst, they would be calm and collected, but also completely shattered to see what their Primarch could become. They still had a deep connection to Sanguinius, and many would feel some kind of psychic pull to join their father in damnation. The legion would be heavily divided. Some would join their Primarch in damnation out of love and loyalty. Some would attempt to put their lord out of his misery. I can imagine Azkaellon and the Sanguinary Guard attempting to subdue or kill their lord out of mercy. A large portion would retreat, likely with the goal of reaching the Emperor, seeing him as the only solution to saving their father's soul. Either way, the fallen angel would come out of Signus as a monster, with likely a few dozen thousand warriors at his back. Perhaps by willingly accepting the Red Thirst back into them, they would become greatly empowered, having the strength of a full legion despite their greatly reduced numbers. I seriously doubt Sanguinius' first act would be to immediately try to usurp Horus. Horus would meet with him and attempt to manage and direct the Raging Angel. To Sanguinius' credit, I still think he could possess a great predatory intelligence. He wouldn't just be a berserker like Angron. He would know that a tactical, intelligent approach to the heresy would increase his chances of draining his father's blood. Thus, that is the approach he would take. Horus would be extremely wary of Sanguinius, seeking opportunities to dispose of him or weaken him. The blow to the loyalist morale would be intense as word spreads of the fallen angel laying waste to Imperial worlds. The loyalist blood angels that escaped would also spread the word. However, most of them would end up on Macragge as they did in canon. Sanguinius would resist Horus's commands and will, frustrating the Warmaster. Ideally, Horus would want to send Sanguinius to take on Guilliman and the Lion, as if he beat them then great, but if he was killed by them then also great. Win or lose, Sanguinius, Guilliman and the Lion would be greatly wounded or killed, as would their legions be. However, with Sanguinius' goal being to reach the Emperor as well as him being aware of Horus's plan, combined with his ability to see the future, it's unlikely he would go for it. Horus would eventually have enough and prepared to dispose of Sanguinius. Similar to how he dealt with Lorga during the heresy, Sanguinius would foresee this and move against Horus first, creating a civil war between the two Primarch brothers just before the Siege of Terra was to take place. Perhaps during the War for Beta Garment is when the two brothers would have their showdown and fight for title of Warmaster, as neither of them would want to reach Terra without the situation sorted out. This would also create a divide within the traitor legions. Conrad would not be present, neither would Lorga as in canon. Alpharis would be dead, and Amigan would have withdrawn the Alpha Legion by now. Perty would side with Horus, seeing Sanguinius as a monster, with Angron likely joining Sanguinius due to their shared rage. Mortarion would join Horus, and Fulgrim would stay neutral and enjoy the show. An interesting point about Magnus was that even after the fall of Prospero, he still didn't know which side to choose for quite some time. Eventually he chose Horus for selfish reasons. However, if a monstrous, destructive Sanguinius was on the traitor's side, that might have been enough to push Magnus towards choosing the loyalists. It would also fit in cleanly with the equal loyalists and traitor situation. It's hard to say who would come out on top. If Horus won, Angron would bow down to him. If Sanguinius won, Mortarion would bow down to Sanguinius, and Perturabo would likely abandon the traitor's cause, becoming disillusioned like how he did during the Siege of Terra after Horus started using too much warp and demon-based weaponry. Both sides of this civil war would be battered and significantly wounded before besieging Terra. Defending Terra would be the Imperial Fists and the White Scars, no Blood Angels present obviously. Guilliman and the Lion would seriously struggle to break through the Ruin Storm without the help of Sanguinius. They eventually would find a way, maybe with the help of the Eldar, but it would take a lot longer, so Terra would stand alone. However, Magnus and his small surviving legion would also be present as loyalists. This creates an interesting final showdown. For fun, let's just say Sanguinius usurps Horus and kills him and takes command, becoming the new War Master. He leads a near infinite tide of cultists, a reduced Blood Angel Legion, a reduced strength Death Guard and World Eaters, and a full strength Emperor's Children, with elements for the Wordbearers, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and Sons of Horus, the ones that had gone too far to chaos to turn back now. They would go up against the Imperial Fists, the White Scars, Magnus, and his few warriors. However, without Perturabo, the traitors would have a really bad time besieging the palace. However, the loyalists don't have Sanguinius to take out the traitor heavy hitters like Angron. What they do have though is Magnus. Magnus who can sit on the Golden Throne and take its burden, allowing the Emperor to stride forth and take to the field. This is also a Magnus who would be given back his noble shard, making him whole and very powerful. So the loss of Sanguinius for the loyalists, if in the likely chance it gives the loyalist Magnus, would allow the Emperor to fight, and he would be more than enough to banish the traitor Primarchs. The siege would not progress as deep as it did during canon without Perturabo. The end result likely being that the Sanguinius War Master spearheading devastating assaults, forcing the Emperor to come out and face him in open battle. A legendary clash would occur, the Fallen Angel of Blood, turbocharged on the Red Thirst and the power of Chaos, going up against the Emperor. I can imagine a similar result to canon. The Emperor does triumph, but at great cost, being mortally wounded in the process and needing to be put on the Golden Throne to preserve himself. Or perhaps with Magnus on it, Malcador could transfer his perpetual power into the Emperor, sacrificing his own life to restore his friend. This would likely create a better outcome for the Imperium overall, and as Sanguinius would be a demon, his death would be permanent, thus bringing an end to his story. Overall, I would find this narrative events to be inferior to canon. Horus made a great War Master and managed to end up being a relatively compelling villain with complex thoughts and emotions about what he was. Sanguinius, on the other hand, would be insane, with very poor motivations and drives for being a traitor that weren't very compelling. Sanguinius was also never the tactical genius Primarch. More so, he would just dive bomb onto the enemy's strong point and one-man army that shit. But it's interesting to see what would happen, and I genuinely believe this would be the most likely outcome. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Fallen Angel of Blood. 4 scales, 3 head variants, 1 week only. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more Fallen content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.